My sophomore year ended on a bit of a sour note, and over the offseason I worked tirelessly in order to get ready for my junior year. On opening day, we traveled to take on number 2 Alabama, and things did not get off on the right foot. Their defense was able to lock us up entirely in the first quarter, and their offense had proven to be a little bit too much for our defense at the moment. But at the beginning of the second, we were able to march down the field where I found and opened Bo Anderson for our first score of the day. One of my few goals this year, outside of winning a Heisman and bringing back a national champion to Wisconsin, would be to break as many records as possible. I'm sure it's just my small man syndrome speaking, but I want to be the greatest Wisconsin quarterback that has ever done it. Over the summer, I worked a lot on my ability to rush the ball and become a dual threat quarterback. Eventually, I'll teach myself how to slide, as last year I took a lot of punishment, and in most games my little body couldn't do it, and I ended up leaving the game with injuries. Halfway through the fourth, we were still down by 11, and I didn't want to start like I did last year on a loss, and I knew that if we would lose to Alabama this week, we would have to give up any hopes for a national championship bid. So I was able to drive us down the field where on first and goal I found a wide open Walker to bring us within one. After that touchdown, I learned that I broke the career passing touchdowns for the school in just my first game of my junior year. On the 2-point conversion, things fell apart quickly as I tried to scramble out of the pocket, but I wasn't able to make the edge. Alabama would go on to run out the clock as they outlasted us 21-16. We were taking on FCS West, and after last week's loss to Alabama, spirits were a little bit low. I figured a win over some paid actors would help us out, but this week our offense was having a lot of trouble getting started. That would all change on this 3rd and 11 where I spotted Terrence Curry streaking up the side of the field all by himself, where he was able to take the ball all the way down to the red zone. We hired a new offensive coordinator this year, and he had a very rush-heavy approach, and in this game it always seemed like if we got remotely close to the end zone, it would always result in a Jason Thomas touchdown. But on this 1st and 10, I wanted to show my offensive coordinator that I had some legs underneath me as well, as I broke off for this big 23-yard gain. FCS West kept the score a lot closer than it should have been, but make no mistake, we were in control the entire game. And at the beginning of the 5th, I faked everyone out with this read option as I was able to get in for my first touchdown as we sealed the deal against the Fusion 28-14. We were taking on Florida Atlantic this week, and after last week's game, I was falling in love with the rushing attack. But I was still relatively new as I spun right into a defender this play. So I encouraged my coach to give me more read options, where on this attempt I was able to hit that dirty spin move just right, and it felt good, and I was in love. But I didn't want to forget about my first passion, throwing absolute laser beams like this one to James Todd, who took it in for our first score of the day. I think the fear of the rushing game scared FAU into playing underneath for the rest of the game, because I was able to find wide open wide receivers as I torched this defense over the top to move us down the field before halftime, where I was able to take this one in with my legs to tie the score up. I was having an amazing game this week. But I also wanted to give big ups to my wide receivers, who were catching every single thing that I tossed in their direction. Not only was I able to rush for a few touchdowns, I was also able to throw for a couple as well. And on this 1st and 10, early on the 4th, I took this read option where I was able to bounce to the outside, leaving multiple FAU defenders tackling air on my way to an 80-yard touchdown for my longest career rushing touchdown. Me and the team celebrated big that night as we were on a 2-game win streak, and I won player of the game with some amazing stats as we doubled FAU's score. We opened up Big Ten competition this week as we traveled to Ryan Field to take on Northwestern University. I have no idea how they managed to get into the top 25, but I was going to do everything in my power to prove that they were frauds. However, on the 2nd and 10, I would get blasted from behind and injured, and the second string would come in for one play where he threw a pick 6 and we'd be down by 7 going into the second quarter. I guess I was just being a big baby because I was back on the field at the beginning of the second where they had us in a 4th and 1, and I was able to utilize my legs to pick up the first down. But on the very next play, I sensed a lot of pressure as I scrambled out of the pocket and tried to get rid of it. I was flattened, and they were able to pick it off and run it all the way back for a touchdown, and I was not getting up as my day ended there and we fell to Northwestern. This week we were traveling to Ohio Stadium to take on the number 18th ranked Ohio State, and I made a vow to myself a long time ago that I would never lose to the Buckeyes. Things did not start off the best, but on this 3rd and 10, late in the second, I found James Todd, who was able to shed a tackle for a few extra yards to give this team the spark we were looking for. With that momentum, we were able to drive all the way down the field where we found ourselves in the red zone. With 45 seconds left, I was able to take the longest route humanly possible around into the end zone. And with all the luck, Ohio State actually turned over the ball where I found a wide open Terrence Curry for the lead going into half. Late in the 3rd quarter, we had a 21-17 lead over Ohio State, and Ohio State's offense could not get going in the second half, as we were able to manage the clock properly and chip away at the field. With just 3 minutes left, I handed it off to Scott Martin, who sealed the deal as we were able to take down Ohio State. In the next week's game, we continue Big Ten Conference play as we were hosting Indiana University, and although we were playing behind the whole first half, I did not want it to stop me from playing like a true Heisman candidate. Where on the 2nd and 10, I was able to drop this one right into Eric White's spread basket, leaving the defender tackling air as he took this one in for a touchdown. Later in the second, we were down by one possession, and it was very apparent to me that neither of our defenses were going to show up today, and I planned on taking full advantage of that as I found a wide open Bo Anderson up the middle to set us up in the red zone. And just a few plays later, on 3rd and goal, I was able to scramble around before I took this one in with my legs. Indiana would go on to score right before half, and the shootout continued. But the beginning of the third could not start out any better, where I was able to take the read option, swerve a few different players, find the outside of the field, and outrun the entire defense. To my surprise, my defense showed up for one drive, and we were able to get the ball back with the opportunity to take the lead, and that is exactly what happened, as I was able to rush out to the right and find the end zone. But unfortunately, their defense decided to show up too, and we were left with just a little over 1 minute to move this ball down the field to send it to overtime. I continued using my legs to exploit the holes in the defense. Later in the drive, on the 2nd and goal, I was able to find Terrence Curry in order to send it to overtime. I was really nervous going into overtime because I've never been able to clutch out a win in overtime in my college career. The shootout continued as we traded back and forth touchdowns, but in the third overtime, on the 2nd and 6, I was able to scramble out of the pocket and fight my way in for a touchdown. But on this 2-point conversion, I got flashbacks of Washington State from last year's opener as we failed and I was stuck on the sidelines watching my defense. They added a lot of pressure and was able to get the sack, and we were able to win in 3 overtimes for my first overtime victory. After my massive game against Indiana last week, and for the first time in my college career, I found myself on the Heisman watch list. In this week's game, we were back on the road to face off against Illinois in another Big Ten Conference matchup. After finding myself on the Heisman watch list, I felt a little different. I felt like I had to be the leader. I felt like I had to put this team on my back. And that's exactly what I did as I moved us down the field. And on this 2nd and 13, I found Terrence Curry and then sat back and watched as he took on 2 guys. However, my defense was atrocious and they would allow any JV team to score on them, so I continued to feed Curry on the way down the field before running this one up the middle. Halfway through the third, we were down by 9, and I found Eric White on this medium gain as I was able to break my school's passing record. At the beginning of the fourth, we were still down by 9, and I felt a great deal of urgency to move us down the field. I was heavily relying on Bo Anderson to get us there, as I found him on this 1st and 10 to set us up in the red zone. And on the very next play, I was able to thread the needle to James Toth to bring us within 1 possession. With 1 minute remaining, they had us on a 4th and 10, and they locked up the backfield where I was set to scramble, but I made a terrible mistake stepping out of bounds where we lost to Illinois by 2. We were taking on FCS Northwest this week, and just like our previous couple of games, we found ourselves down early on the scoreboard. We were finding it incredibly difficult to move the ball and get into a groove, but earlier in the second, we found that spark we've been looking for. A few plays later, I was able to launch this absolute diamond to the end zone where James Toth made a heroic catch. Halfway through the third, I could tell FCS's defense has slowed down considerably, as they allowed Eric White to streak all the way down the field by himself where we connected for my longest touchdown pass of my career. And along with that, I also broke my very first NCAA record for the longest touchdown pass ever. It didn't stop there because later on the third, I noticed that Eric White created enough separation from the tiny Tim that was guarding him as we connected for another massive touchdown. The record breaking didn't stop there because halfway through the fourth, I connected with James Toth on this touchdown as he helped me break my school's record for the most career passing yards in a game. And after the game, my teammates all congratulated me on my record-breaking day. We were hosting Purdue this week, and just like previous games, I was stuck battling uphill as we were down 7 early on the first. Despite all that, this game couldn't have started out any better actually, as I was able to fake out the entire defense with this read option where I bounced to the outside and left everyone behind. And it felt good that all my training was finally paying off. That rushing touchdown was actually the only piece of offense we had this entire first half, as Purdue was able to put up 28 on us halfway through the second, but I was battling back with a touchdown to Eric White before getting the ball back with less than 1 minute before halftime. I was able to drive us down the field, where I found Terrence Curry to get us into the red zone, and just one play later, I was able to scramble out of the pocket before locating and hooking up with Eric White. We got the ball to start the second half, and I wanted nothing more than to drive down the field and tie the game up, and that's exactly what happened as I found Eric White for our third connection. But things took a turn for the worse as my tackle blocked the wrong guy and I got flatlined for a safety. Even with that safety, there was still plenty of time on the clock to come back and win this game, and on this 1st and goal, I utilized my legs to bring us within 2 points. With just under 2 minutes left in the game, we had the ball back and set for a game-winning drive, but I handed the ball off to Jason Thomas, who was fighting for extra yards when he fumbled the ball and Purdue picked it up, where they were able to run it all the way back and ending our day in heartbreaking fashion. And I don't know what more I could have done after I put on an absolute clinic with these stats. All my hard work was paying off as I was a semifinalist for the Walter Camp, Maxwell, and O'Brien. We were taking on Penn State this week, and a few things occurred to me before the game started. We were still not bowl eligible, and I have never beaten Penn State, but both of those were set to end today as I found Bo Anderson for the first score. And just before half, we had the ball back up by 7, and we had the opportunity to go down the field and put even more up on the scoreboard. And that's exactly what happened as Eric White had his defender looking for ghosts as he took this one in. With 2 minutes left in the third, we were up by 8 points, and I was firing on all cylinders as I sliced up Penn State's secondary. We finally hit our groove, and Penn State's defense had no answer for it. And on this 3rd and 6, halfway through the fourth, I was able to find Bo Anderson as I put this game away for my first victory over Penn State. In this week's game, we were taking on number 12 ranked Nebraska, and I don't know if it was me or the weak tackling, but I didn't take these guys serious. I don't know who Nebraska had to pay to get into the top 25, let alone almost the top 10. But so far today, their offense was a bit atrocious. On this 4th and 8, they had us pinned for a little bit before I found Eric White to set us up in the red zone. And just a few plays later, on 3rd and goal, I was able to connect with him all over again to go up by 10. Nebraska would go on to score, but we had the ball back up by 3 with less than a minute before half. And I really wanted to keep adding to this scoreboard, and Nebraska's defense made it really easy as they were leaving wide open wide receivers. I stayed aggressive on this 4th and 3, finding Terrence Curry for another score. Things in the second half were going just as smooth as they were in the first, as I was able to find the end zone multiple times, but Nebraska's offense finally woke up and we were down by 1 with 43 seconds left. And on the 2nd and 10, I was able to dig deep as I connected with James Toth to put us in field goal range. On the sideline, I was able to watch as we kicked the game-winning field goal to get the win in the massive upset over number 12 Nebraska. In the next week's game, we were traveling to Minnesota to take on the Golden Gophers for the Battle for the Axe, and unlike a lot of games this year, we weren't actually playing from behind. But that would only last seconds as I got absolutely creamed here where I lost the ball and I was not happy. I couldn't tell you why, but for whatever reason, when we played from behind, we were always playing our best football. I was able to move the ball down the field before finding Bo Anderson for a score, and just moments later on the 2nd and 10, I was able to find James Todd, who shed a tackle and ran the slowest 40-yard dash all the way to the end zone. I'm actually glad that Minnesota got that first touchdown, because I figured it would be the only one they got today with how they're playing. And on the 2nd and 6, I was able to find James Todd again as he helped me add to my already broken school record. The Battle for the Axe was actually my favorite time of the year, and it acted almost like a second Christmas, as I was able to destroy a whole fan base in just one game. I'm sure their trophy case is getting a bit dusty nowadays, considering they have not won this Axe in 12 straight seasons, and after the clinic I put on today, they might as well count it 13. Honestly, this has been the easiest game that I've played all season, as we were running up the score on Minnesota, and with just 2 minutes left, I took this one up the middle to stretch our lead to 35 where Coach pulled us. I get school spirit, but I have no idea why these fans continue to travel just to watch their team lose. And for the 3rd straight season, we were bringing the Axe home with us, as I won player of the game with some amazing stats and 6 total touchdowns, and I knew that I was never going to let this Axe go. Despite my great season, I was unable to win any awards. And we were taking on Baylor in this year's Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl, where the game did not start off in the best conditions as we were down 2 possessions halfway through the 2nd quarter. But we were able to find a little bit of a groove as we worked down the field in short gains, where I found Bo Anderson up the middle for our first score. Baylor would go on to leave the door wide open for us as they committed a turnover just a few plays later, and we had the chance to tie the score up. And that's exactly what happened on the 2nd and goal, where I left this defender tackling Casper as I got in. Baylor would end up driving down the field and kicking a field goal right before half to regain the lead. But we got the ball to start the second half, and I was taking full advantage of the short game in order to move us down the field. And on the 2nd goal, I threaded this needle through a tight window to true freshman McConnell to take the 3rd lead change of the day. Baylor's offense went flat at the worst time as ours got hot. We were able to move down the field as I found Anderson to get us into the red zone. And on this 1st and goal, I found James Todd in the corner of the end zone to go up by 11. At the beginning of the 4th, we were only up by 4. That wasn't until I found McConnell down the field who mossed the defender and took it into the end zone. All we had to do is secure a few first downs in order to run out the clock, and that is exactly what we did as we were able to kneel the ball and win the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl. I originally thought at the beginning of the year that if I could win a Heisman and a national championship, that I would go ahead and declare early and try my luck in the draft. Well, neither of those happened, and it led us here to where we were Buffalo Wild Wing champions. I had an amazing season where I broke so many records, and I can't wait until I can get into my senior year.